Okay, I think we're live.
Peace, peace, peace and plenty, peace and love, peace and power, everybody. Peace and empowerment. Where you at, family? Where are you at? We are live. We are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube. I see a check mark on both. We are here at Veterans for Peace. We have two people in the live room, so we have a community. The community is growing. So we are live here on Veterans for Peace. Stand Down live webinar, our weekly live podcast. This is a member-run show. We are members of Veterans for Peace, and we are interested in the dialogue, in creating content around the dialogue for the costs of war and imperialism. We do that by bringing in world-class guests from this country and around the world to talk about social issues that highlight imperialism and the cost of the military-industrial complex. So our chat room is a safe space. Please enjoy yourself. Please engage with other people, other guests, other visitors, and please share this page. Please share this page and share this conversation, because conversations about peace need to be more popular, need to be popularized, not on the fringe. All right. So let's not be on the fringe. Don't be scared to share it. Don't be scared to be proud of your views. We know that this is occupied land. We recognize that these machines and these tools that we are using are the creation of stolen goods and stolen bodies created on stolen land. And this conversation started in response to the national protests that for justice, for Black lives, in response to the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and still no justice. So these conversations are necessary, and these conversations are vital, and we ask you to engage in our chat room in these conversations. Share resources that you're looking up and that you're reading. I am so pleased with our guest today, who's already on screen. We have Krystal Two Bulls with us today, from the Land Back Initiative and the NDN Collective. So we are going to have an incredible conversation with her, and I just want to highlight the ongoing feeling in our world, this tumultuous feeling of who knows what's up, who knows what's right, questioning everything, rather than accepting some things as universal truths and and demanding justice. It's not always. We're at a point in our country now where it's like politically incorrect where we are, where we can have a presidential debate and somebody can get interrupted over 100 times. And then there's a debate afterwards about what was going on. And when it was clear that it was a child versus an adult. And, I'm not endorsing candidates, but you should go vote, because we have to change things. And our guest's partner, Nick Thielsen, talked about voting. And the importance of it, and the importance of being involved. And I've seen our chat room grow to 40 people. I'm asking these 40 to share this conversation right now. And we've got two incredible things I want you to see in the public comments on Facebook and YouTube. A link where there's 3 things you can do right now to support this land back movement. And that is watch this incredible video at landback.org. You can sign the petition to get Mount Rushmore back, and you can donate to this organization. And there's another comment at the top of the chat where you can see Krystal Two Bulls and Nick Thielsen talk about the case that they're currently facing, the RICO case. We might touch on it a little bit today, but I want you to be informed and inform your family and friends and be proud of your information. All right. So I think with that, we should just really get into it. And I'm going to introduce Krystal Two Bulls to the audience. And then we're going to just go into the conversation, because we need all the time we have. So Krystal Two Bulls, Northern Cheyenne, Oglala, Lakota, Director of the Land Back campaign is Oglala Lakota and Northern Cheyenne from Lame Deer, Montana. She has extensive experience as an organizer and on the front lines with campaign development and management on local, national, and transnational campaigns for social, racial, and environmental justice. Krystal's identity as a Native American veteran is central to her organizing and storytelling. At the heart of Krystal's work are the connections between collective wellness, environmental justice, indigenous people's rights, and anti-militarism. In healing, you get that in healing. I love this bio. In healing from her experience as a soldier, Krystal has dedicated herself to embodying what she views as the essential quality of a warrior, a commitment to the well-being of not only her people and their relationship to the land, but that of all peoples. I mean, that's why we all joined. That's why we all enlisted and or signed up, you know, and became officers, whatever the case is, to defend the land. So please, Krystal, I want to hear from you. I just want you to introduce yourself and tell us where you are right now. You know, take your time to tell us about this moment in the world and where you are in response to all of these convergences of you know, for human liberation and land rights.
Yes, thank you. First, Peveshev relatives, Mene Wostat Nanehav. My name's Krystal Two Bulls. As mentioned, I'm Oglala Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, calling in from beautiful Northern Cheyenne territory in southeastern Montana. Yeah, so just diving right into it, I am the director of the Land Back campaign with Indian Collective. And, you know, maybe I'll go into a little bit of that and kind of how that, you know, sets the stage for the conversations that we're having. But right now, in this moment that we are in, you know, myself, I'm a veteran, as mentioned. I'm also a member of About Face Veterans Against War. And we, you know, kind of what led into the Land Back campaign and my involvement with it anyways is, you know, we were in Tulsa. We showed up in Tulsa because Trump decided that it was a good idea to launch his presidential campaign in Tulsa on Juneteenth. And to me, that was a very clear slap in the face and a very clear disrespect to our Black relatives on that day, that sacred day, on that sacred land, you know, where massacres happen. And so, you know, we organized in with VFP and with About Face, and we showed up there and were able to support and, you know, hold down some actions and hold down some organizing and support of local Oklahoma folks as well. And you know, from there, then he announced that he was going to be in South Dakota in the Black Hills, right, for Mount Rushmore to have a big fireworks display on the 4th of July. And it ended up being on the 3rd of July. And we felt like that was another slap in the face as well, most especially this time directed at Indigenous folks and at Native folks, because the Black Hills for us are sacred lands. And that is where parts of our origin stories and our relationship to the land comes from. And it is also, you know, it's a place where, as one of my organizing brothers said, it's a place where we courted, a place where we had marriages, and a place where children were born and where our lives were lived. And it's a place where our language comes from. It's a place where our connection to the earth and ceremonies come from. And so it's all of that for us, right? And so what we basically did is we organized and we said that Trump was trespassing on our territories, in not only just our traditional territories, but also in a legal standpoint as well, based on the 1851 and the 1868 Fort Laramie treaties, is that land was part of a contract, and a legally binding contract between these nations. It was 50 plus nations whose traditional territories are in that area, and the US government. And so that was our lands, those were our territories. And then gold was discovered. And then that treaty was then broken And then further on down the line, like a lawsuit was filed. And so we actually are in the middle and still a part of the longest standing lawsuit against the US government in US history. And so they offered us a settlement for that land, for the Black Hills. And we, to this day, no one has accepted a penny of that settlement. And so legally, that land and that territory is still within our stewardship and our care. And so we were arrested for the actions taken up on Mount Rushmore on July 3rd. Several of us are facing, there's 21 arrests, I think 20 charges. Nick Tilson, our president and CEO of Indian Collective, is facing 3 felony charges, and the rest of the land defenders, including myself, are facing several misdemeanors each across the board. And so all of that led up to the Land Back campaign, because what we experienced there was a very spiritual and aligned experience. I've been on a lot of different front lines and a part of a lot of different campaigns and a lot of different organizing spaces. And to this day, that is one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had in being up there, in our lands and defending and protecting our lands. And so that fed into our Land Back campaign. And so I want to share a little bit about Land Back, the movement. So the Land Back movement is something that has existed for generations, right? Like Indigenous folks that have been forcibly removed from their lands have been fighting to get their lands back and reclaim relationship and stewardship of these lands for generations. As Indian Collective with the campaign, we're stepping into a long legacy of organizing, a long legacy that houses sacrifice and work and effort from, our predecessors and our ancestors. And so we're stepping into this campaign, and we're using the campaign as a mechanism to just simply connect and resource and amplify and coordinate these movements across Turtle Island that are fighting to defend lands, that are fighting to reclaim their relationship to the land, that are fighting to reclaim stewardship of these lands. And, that's the way that we're envisioning the campaign. But at the cornerstone of that campaign is Mount Rushmore. In the Black Hills. And so we are demanding that Mount Rushmore be closed. And we are saying that Mount Rushmore and all public lands in the Black Hills need to be returned to the stewardship of their original stewards. So we're talking about the Ocheti Shakawi, and we're talking about, the original territories of nations who used to live and exist in that area as well. Mount Rushmore also, not only is that significant because it is in the heart of our sacred lands, it's also very significant just on a political analysis and a political framework as well, because the Mount Rushmore is the ultimate shrine to white supremacy. In this moment of unrest, and in this moment of tearing down colonial statues across this country, and really calling out white supremacy in this fake history that those statues continue to perpetuate, we have to look at Mount Rushmore. Mount Rushmore is like the ultimate shrine of white supremacy. And so what we're saying, not only are we reclaiming our traditional roles as stewards of that land, but we are also saying that we need to dismantle that white supremacy, and we need to shut down Mount Rushmore that represents that. And when we shut down Mount Rushmore, that exists in the world's most powerful, political and military power in the heart of this nation, that changes the political landscape of what is possible for not only Indigenous peoples in reclaiming land, but all peoples in our struggle to fight and dismantle white supremacy. And so I think that, that is really how we're looking at the campaign. And that is what, the Land Back movement is something that's overarching that no one has control of, right? But I think that we're in a moment of being in a place where we can push the Land Back movement forward, and we can do it in a coordinated and resourced way. And we can expand out to deepening our relationships with movement partners in organizations and groups that are organizing right now, and really look at how do we work together for what is truly collective liberation, right? How do we work towards that in a way with a vision where we can see how Black liberation and Indigenous sovereignty and Indigenous land back coexist in this world, right? And so we're really deepening our relationships and working to build those relationships out, so that way we're fighting on this front. I think there's also a piece, sometimes I think whenever we're talking about this, like as a veteran myself, I as you know, my bio mentioned, I really hold that in a very specific way, because it's an identity of mine that for the longest time as an organizer, I was ashamed of and I didn't claim. So in organizing spaces and movement spaces, I would never say that I was a veteran until after Standing Rock and organizing there. And I had seen where my skill sets and my experience and my knowledge that I gained through the military, how that actually helped me in those spaces, in those organizing spaces, and we're able to take those skills and translate them over to nonviolent direct action, into organizing, and use them against our oppressors, right? And so after I discovered that I can do that and I can actually use these skills for good, it was something that I was able to start to claim. And then it really had me dive into more analysis around understanding this identity. And so for me, in looking at land back, right, I have to really think about the political analysis of this. And so for us, whenever we're talking about dismantling white supremacy, and we're looking at all of these systems of oppression, we always say we have to go to the roots, right, of these issues, and not just put band-aids and address the symptoms, but go to the roots. And for us, and for everybody, what we're asserting is that the roots are going all the way back to the doctrine of discovery. The mechanism that allowed for us to be forcefully removed from our lands, and to build a nation on the backs of a stolen people, right? And so really looking at that is like, when we were forcefully removed from our lands, it was the U.S. military that did that. It was the U.S. military that attempted genocide on Indigenous peoples, so that there was access to the land, and so that there was access to the resources, right? And so it's important to understand that the U.S. military is also a mechanism that enforces white supremacy. And to me, what happened there, the colonization of the land, the colonization of the peoples, the U.S. military forcefully removing us from our lands to get access to these resources in the land, was then taken as a template, and then used going overseas to other Indigenous peoples' lands, and to remove them from their land and to get access to their resources. And so to me, that is how, and it's a very simplified way of looking at U.S. imperialism, but that is how U.S. imperialism manifested, was based on Indigenous peoples here on Turtle Island being removed from their lands, and the U.S. military being that mechanism that enforced that, and then continuing to be the mechanism that enforces the further removal of other Indigenous peoples globally from their lands to get access to resources. And then, if we want to go even bigger on that, like even looking at well, why are we trying to get access to land and resources overseas? Because of capitalism and because of corporatism. And then who makes those decisions, right? Well, those same corporations put money into the hands of our legislators and our Congress and our Senate. And then they make laws that allow for us to continuously be at war, and allow for us to continuously be in those places that we have no business being in, right? And so I think it's important, especially on this show, to make that connection of how land back campaign and how militarism are very intertwined. And that when we talk about land back and we talk about that campaign and that movement, we do have to continue talking about militarism and dismantling the military industrial complex, and going even farther into the defunding the police, defunding ICE and Border Patrol, because those are all mechanisms that enforce white supremacy. But yeah, so I just wanted to make that connection back to back to how militarism, the US military, being a veteran, is all connected back to the Land Back campaign and the Land Back movement that we're pushing forward right now.
Excellent, excellent. Lots of great points there that speak to our audience and to people across the world in a very serious way. Talking about, speaking of our veteran audience, I was reading your bio and I noticed that you and I both happened to be, you were in Kuwait in 2009 and I was in Southern Iraq in 2009. And in the last show, I showed a lot of photos of the devastation that's been wrought in that area. But I was wondering, maybe you could kind of back me up about how bad it was down there. What was your experience in Kuwait in 2009 specifically?
You know, honestly, like, so here's a little bit of backstory to that. Is, you know, when I got orders to deploy, I went to my family and I let them know that, like, hey, I have orders to Iraq, you know, and this is what it is. And my family immediately held ceremony for me. So in our culture, in our ways, we have ways of how we go about that, ways of gaining protection in prayer, right? Through our culture and through our ceremonies. And they immediately had a ceremony to really just ask for prayers for me and protection for me. And it was really interesting because I had orders for Iraq and they were, you know, and that's where I was going. And then I went on individual mobilization orders. And so I didn't go with a unit. I didn't go with the people I knew. I went by myself. And then I got to Kuwait and they lost my orders. They couldn't find where I was supposed to go. And so it was really weird. They recut my orders and they just said, like, okay, well, you're going to stay here. You'll stay in Kuwait. And so that's actually how I ended up in Kuwait. And to be honest, you know, like Kuwait, we didn't carry our weapons. There wasn't a need. We were, you know, relatively in a safe space. And so my experience there, you know, I think it was very different than a lot of folks who were in Iraq and in different places. And so I will say that my experience there, though, was, you know, there was a couple key things that happened there. One was the TCNs, and so if folks are you know, familiar with like third country nationals, so they're folks that don't belong to the U.S. military, but also are not from the country that we are currently in. They come onto the bases in military installations and they work, whether it's, you know, janitorial work or whether it's you know, in the cafeterias or whether it's you know, selling souvenirs from their home countries and their own cultures. And so what I ended up doing a lot is I actually went and would visit with them. And I started to realize that I had more in common with them than the people I served with. And that was a real eye opener and also not surprising at the same time. And so it was one of those moments where I was like, wow, like this, I relate to more of what they're going through than I do with anyone I'm serving with right now. And the other thing that happened during that time was just being sexually harassed by, you know, older, higher ranking males and almost being chaptered out of the military for refusing advances. And that in itself was a very traumatic experience that, you know, that unfortunately is a very common experience for women in the military. And honestly, those things were very formative for me whenever I came back and I got home, because prior to that, I thought I would make the military. I thought that would be career for me. You know, I wanted to go into psyops and I had all these visions of, you know, going forward at this career and this is what I'm going to do. And after those experiences and those kind of revelations that I had there, I knew this, I couldn't go forward. I couldn't continue with the military. And so when I got home, you know, I was in the reserves and, you know, barely at that, you know, I had to fight to just be done with it and to, you know, finish my remaining years in the reserves. And that was a struggle. And yeah, so that was my experience, you know, in Kuwait. And so I definitely had a very different experience than a lot of folks that were, you know, in Iraq during the same time as I was in Kuwait. I think that the other part of it was also the land. And so even just, you know, staying grounded on that, like I remember being so lonesome, you know, and I'm sure other veterans can attest to that as well, is that being so lonesome. But for me, it was a visceral thing, like the land that I knew and was raised on and grew up around, like, you know, in Northern Cheyenne territory, we have some of the cleanest, our highest air quality and water quality standards in the nation. You know, we can still drink water out of the earth. It's still we're still able to do that. And so going to Kuwait, where I didn't have access to the land in the same way, and I didn't have access to the same medicines and the same relationship, was really difficult for me. But I remember calling my mom and visiting with her and just like telling her how lonesome I was and that struggle. And she said, like, no matter where you go on earth, like you're still standing on Mother Earth. And she just encouraged me to reach down, touch the earth, and pray, because it's still Mother Earth. And that was like a really strong moment for me. And it's something that guides this work currently right now with Land Back, right? With the Land Back campaign, the Land Back movement is like, Land Back represents not just us literally getting access and literally reclaiming that relationship and stewardship to the land, but it also represents everything that was taken from us during that time when we were forcefully removed. And I think that when I was deployed, that was something I think that was forming in me that I didn't even realize was going to play out today in my organizing, in the current work that I'm doing. So I know that doesn't, you know, fully cover your question, but that's kind of what my experience was, and, you know, how it's relative to what I'm currently doing right now.
That's absolutely relative. Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think that's a lot of veterans have a similar experience, and it's such a shame that we are so separated from the earth. And I think it's part of like capitalist strategy that we have to view ourselves as other and having some kind of dominion or ownership over the earth. And it's so normalized that, you know, white folks that join the military and are put in these situations aren't nearly as cognizant of it, and they go on just kind of living the lie their whole lives and separating themselves. And that's something that's been very useful for me and informative for me to study indigenous traditions and help me turn the corner and turn away from my imperial brainwashing. So I appreciate that very much. Miles, you look like you had a question there. Do you have anything you'd like to?
I mean, I have questions. I'm loving this conversation. I see that you're very inspired by Krystal's movement and by her passion. So I mean, I'm loving this conversation. This is really cool. Krystal, your name is also, like, I hadn't thought of this earlier, but your name is like prophetic or something, right? This is your given name, isn't it? This is your name.
Yeah, this is my English name.
Have you, and you've had it since birth?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
like, and then you say it's like crystal clear, like the picture you paint. You know what I'm saying? It's beautiful. I absolutely love it. I love
You know
that.
what's really funny is the story behind my name is when I was born, it was raining. And so after I was born, in the window when the sun came up, there was like raindrops on the window that looked like crystals. And then the rain. And so my middle name is actually Krystal Rain Two Bulls is my full given name. Yeah. But it's so funny.
I love it. I love it.
That's a point of conversation.
Yeah, reality is always better than fiction. You know, it's beautiful. The connections you make between the U.S. military moving indigenous people off of their land, native peoples off their land, and then that being the testing ground for going around the world and expanding American imperialism. That's how, you know, that's why I'm here. That's why that's what Mike is talking about right now. That's why a lot of veterans in the chat room feel out of place when they come back home. And then their home is stolen land. And so then talking about defund the police and land back triggers a lot of people, maybe in the same ways, like veterans can be triggered by these conversations, and then farmers and landowners in Montana and the Dakotas are triggered by these conversations as well. So how do you reconcile that and and move it forward and progress the conversation and bring those people in and make them see the value in this?
Oh man, that's a big question. I guess the way that we're looking at it, like, to me, like, you do have to have the political analysis. And for me, a lot of it is really looking at, like, we can't continue to operate in this like reform. Like, reform is like code for treating symptoms, right? And so if we continuously use this language about going to the root, right, and going to the root causes of white supremacy, going to the root causes of oppression, systemic oppression, the root causes of why our healthcare system is the way it is and like completely inadequate, or why our educational system is completely inadequate, or all of these things. And for me, like, that means like we're not going to the roots. We're still just treating the symptoms. And if we truly go to the roots of something, that means we're going back to the fact that this country was founded on attempted genocide. It was founded on stolen land, and it was built by stolen people. And everything that came from that we see in existence today is built on top of that foundation and is inherently white supremacist and inherently upholding that. And so it's like trying to fix those systems, it doesn't make sense. And so for me, that's like the key part of it, is really like we all want something better, right? Like we all want to be able to like live our lives without fear, and live our lives without oppression, and to live our lives based on who we are as people, as human beings. And I think that, if that is the case, then we have to understand that like our liberation and our freedom and our happiness and our well-being is all tied up together. And so when we go down to like a basic human basis of that, is like, if I'm telling you I'm in pain, that is not enough for you to maybe just like stop an action or address something happening, then that's a lack of humanity. And so for me, it's the analysis of understanding the root causes of these pains and oppression. It's also like just getting down to a really human basis of like understanding that we are in relationship to each other, and that like we are interdependent, and that our ability to move forward and to really achieve liberation is bound up together. And so we have to really deepen those relationships. And so if we are truly working towards dismantling white supremacy, and we are truly trying to get at supporting each other and making sure that we are not experiencing oppression, and we are truly trying to show up for each other, then that means we have to look at the whole picture. That means we do have to go all the way back to the doctrine of discovery. We have to go all the way back to those moments, in that very moment when we were forcefully removed from our lands. And let's start there. Let's start healing from that point. Let's reconcile that. And then let's move from that point together collectively. Because like with Indian Collective's work and with the land back work, we're not just doing this for Indigenous people. Environmental justice work is the same way. When Indigenous peoples are on the front lines fighting to resist pipelines and fighting all of these extractive industries, we're not doing that for ourselves. We're doing that for all peoples, because we all live on this earth. We all breathe this air. We all drink the water, and we all need the nourishment that grows from the earth for our bodies to even live. And so we fight these fights for everybody. And I think like now we're in a moment where we're saying like, we need folks to show up for this too now. And we have to go back to the roots of this. And that is how we have to move forward. Otherwise, we are just continuing to perpetuate colonialism. We're continuing to perpetuate white supremacy, and we're continuing to allow for the oppression of all peoples that are experiencing violence and harm in this country and even globally. And so for me, that's like trying to take it back to those points has been a way that I've found people relate to and connect to. But I do know that these are hard conversations, right? And with land back, like we're not coming for people's houses. We're not coming for people's ranches or any of that. Like we are starting with public lands, right? Like that's our starting point. Like Mount Rushmore, close that shit down because it represents white supremacy and it's perpetuating violence in this country, and return that land and all public lands in the Black Hills back to its original stewards. And then we'll go from that point. And so I think that, yeah, being really clear that like, we're not coming for people's lands or people's houses or homes. We're saying public lands, right? And that is our starting point. That is the point from which we move. So just to also clarify that, because I know that these conversations do invoke fear, right? But I think that we have to have the conversations, and we're in a moment where we have to have these conversations and deepen these relationships, or we're just going to continue going on the way that we've been going on. And as we all know, and now as we're all experiencing and watch play out, is not working for us. What is currently being done is not working. We have to do something different. We have to shift that focus. We have to go to the roots, and we have to do it in relationship to each other, knowing that like how we move forward is bound up together. Your struggles are my struggles. When you win, I win. And that's how we move forward. So yeah, that's kind of how I view that, I guess.
That's beautiful. The argument being flipped on activists that they are against capitalism or against, progress is so insane. I've always found it really insane. You're a person who's you're a water defender. You believe water is life. You're a land defender, and somehow a corrupt system, a known corrupt system that's propped up, is able to charge you with something and or label you, put a stamp on you as dangerous because of your views, because you're outspoken, and then people accept it. It's always been the craziest thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious. I have a question. So for veterans, for activists, for people around the world in their living homes, in their living rooms, in their homes, where they are, do you have any tips or advice? What can we actually, where do we start? What do we do? Obviously, first, if we can, we need to contribute money to the Black Hills Legal Fund, and we need to participate in Land Back. But are there any tips and tricks? Where should people start when it comes to understanding Land Back and contributing to the cause?
Let me just say one thing that I wanted to.
Sure.
I'll preface the same question to you. You said you laid such a gem in there that if you don't understand when I'm asking you to stop, that you're hurting me, then how can we even talk? And I teach my sons that as soon as a person says stop, you have to stop. Like if you're play fighting or you're pushing, because you have to respect another person's space. And so with that being, yeah, where do people start? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's another really big question that I don't know if I necessarily have all the answers to, but I can share how I get engaged. But I think more specifically in regards to like Land Back, right, is Land Back's not owned by Indian Collective in the Land Back campaign, right? Like I mentioned earlier, Land Back is a movement that has been in existence for generations, right? Folks around the world have been engaged in Land Back organizing since we've been removed from lands, right? And so I think with that said, is that means wherever you live currently right now on Turtle Island, so, referencing the continent here, North America, is wherever you live, you're on Indigenous land. And I guarantee that there's Indigenous people there, and that they are still a fully thriving people. They still exist. We are not historical figures the way that the educational system likes to portray us. But find out who those people are. Find out whose land you're living on. Find out who are the peoples that are around you. Deepen those relationships. Currently right now, there are battles being fought all over this land. Right now we have organizers down in Octum territory, so down in southern Arizona, that are fighting the border wall and the construction there. We have folks over in Kumeyaay near San Diego, also fighting the construction of the border wall because it's splitting up families, splitting up literal nations of people that exist. It's dividing them and putting a physical wall in between you and your relative. And so they're there doing that work. Up in so-called Canada, you have the Wet'suwet'en, you have 1492 Land Back Way that are organizing and reclaiming their lands and reclaiming their stewardship to that land. You have Oak Flat, who's been fighting for years the selling of their sacred lands and their sacred sites to a mining company, right? Like you have all the pipeline fights that are in existence, Line 3 in Minnesota, we have Dakota Access Pipeline, we have the Keystone expansion, so KXL, you have the Bayou Bridge project, you have fights that are going on all over, everywhere. Oklahoma has like some of the most pipelines running through their territories and like earthquakes that never used to exist there. You have folks organizing there. We have folks over in California that are starting to get land back because there was so many unratified treaties there where land was just taken. And so I think that no matter where you are right now, like you're on stolen land. That's a fact. And it's not being said for you to like beat yourself up and all of those things. It's being said so you can acknowledge and recognize the true history of this land and in this nation, and then move from there. And then try to deepen those relationships, try to establish that communication, try to see if there's organizing, over in Oakland. There's Ohlone folks that are trying to get pieces of land back that they can reconnect to and that they can have ceremony on. They're fighting like no shell mounds. Their shell mounds were being removed, burial grounds. And so there's everywhere you look, there's fights being fought for land back and for reclamation of land and for stewardship of land and for to defend the land, to prevent further exploitation and further desecration of that land. And so I think that if folks just put a little bit of time and effort into researching that and into looking up what nations exist there around them, I think that they'll find them, and then that doesn't even include all of the federally unrecognized tribes that exist, right? Kingdom of Hawaii as well is an occupied nation. Even going even farther than that, you go down to the global south, Palestine, all of these places. And so I think it's important that we do the research and that we figure out whose lands we're on. We find a way to like deepen those relationships. And I guarantee that there's active campaigns and there's active frontline organizing going on right now that you can engage in and that you can participate in. And in the future, as we move forward, hopefully the Land Back campaign, we're only like 2 weeks old and we haven't even launched yet. We launch on Monday on Indigenous Peoples Day. So I encourage folks, check out landback.org, follow up for notifications for everything that's going to be happening on that day. But in the future, we hope that, that we will have like interactive maps where folks can be able to see what is happening in that area and they can connect and see like, oh, like I live in this area and oh my God, like look, all this organizing is happening right there in my backyard, and then engage, and then also like, I just want to encourage people because I kind of get asked this question a lot too of like, well, how do I do it? What's the first step? And where do I go? And like, just do it. I think that there's a lot of time spent in really overthinking how we get engaged, but like, just do it. And if you misstep and you make a mistake, that's all right. Just apologize and keep moving forward. Keep trying to figure out the work. Keep asking questions. And I think that we need to stop overthinking it and just engage, just take action, find those folks that are out there that are doing the work because I know for a fact that there's organizing in front lines all over Turtle Island, happening even presently right now, in this moment going on. And so I think there's plenty of ways for people to engage, plenty of places in groups for people to support and get involved in addition to staying engaged with the Land Back campaign through Indian Collective. So hopefully we're a space that can connect folks to those places as we go, but also just want to encourage people to do that work on your own too. Don't rely on us to do that work for you. There's a lot of places that you can be engaged in right now.
As within, so without. As below, so above. Right? You can't expect to fix other people's problems if you can't fix your own. A lot of folks here like to focus on Palestine, right? Patrick McCann is in the chat room. We had a conversation earlier today, and a lot of veterans and activist groups like to focus on the injustice there and ignore what's going on right here at home. But it's injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere, right? Yeah, we can address if we're here at home in whatever capacity you live in, and you can't recognize the fact that this is stolen land, like the core essence of it, it's pretty much started at the same time as capitalism. If you can't reconcile that in your daily thinking and think of a way forward, because capitalism is also the root cause, and patriarchy is the root cause for the state of the world today, as far as the environment and global wars, then it's really hard to reconcile how this can move forward. And you say land back is only for public lands. All lands should be public. Like, I'm very radical in the sense that we shouldn't have border walls or anything. We should live in a trusting world, a trusting society where, you don't have to worry about somebody stealing from you because you'd open your door for that person, and I'm sure, does that wisdom, does that knowledge come up in you say your family had a ceremony for you when you were, when you got orders to deploy. So, if somebody's, this is kind of tangential, but now somebody has deployed and they've come home and they're stranded, they're struggling, what I'm saying? And they're walking down the street. Would your family provide for that person, or is that person on their own because they're not part of your blood family, people being scared to give up their private land while other people have nothing is it's just horrible. I don't really have a question there.
I think too, like, kind of to add on what you're saying, Miles, is like that gets down to like our principles and our morals, right? And like in who we are as people. And for me, like I've had to really, over the years, and I'm just now coming to this place through a lot of mistakes, a lot of missteps, a lot of messing up and poor choices and poor decisions. But we really have to figure out like who we are, who do we want to be in this world, and what are your principles that guide that? What are the morals that guide that? And I've had to develop out a set of principles for myself, because I get called into different spaces in a lot of different movement spaces and organizing spaces and all of that. And we have to remember who we are in those places and not get wrapped up in all of the chaos and the things that it's easy to get lost in, especially in the moment that we're in, and really have to stay rooted in our principles. And I think that's kind of what you were talking about is like, yeah, is just like, do we help other folks, which yes, right? Like, I mean, I do this work, like I said, not because it benefits me as a person. I would not choose this life if I had a choice. If everything was good and we were free of oppression and all of those things, all the negative things, like I wouldn't choose this kind of life. I would be home. I would be on my own land all the time, and I would be out hunting and gardening and learning more about our medicines that grow in our plant relatives. And, I would be riding horses with my family, and I would be doing those things out there And that's what I would choose, right? Like that's what I would choose to be doing. But we don't live in that world right now. Like we don't live in that place where I can do those things free of fear, free of oppression. And so therefore, like I have to be in some of these spaces because I feel called to that. That is my calling, my role. And to do that, I have to stay aligned in these principles. I have to have these things that help me and that guide me through that. And they're, for me, they're based on teachings from my family. They're based on teachings from the land, from our ceremony, our culture, and teachings and things that friends and organizers and spaces I've been in have brought to me, and mentors, right? A lot of things like I've had a lot of really good mentors in my life that have really formulated some solid principles for me. I even have a brother from Hawaii, Andre Perez, that organizes there, and his words always ring in my ear. He's always like, we have to be principled. And, and I took that to heart, and I really think about that a lot. And, so that's what I've done is I develop principles for myself, and I encourage people to do that. I encourage everyone to think about that. Like really look at yourself and look at who you want to be, and then develop principles out that you want to be the guiding guideposts for how you move about this world and how you move in relationship to other people and humanity. But yeah, I think that's what you brought up really like triggered that in me, is that those principles and morals, like we have to be grounded in those. And it's important, right? Especially for veterans, when our principles and morals, a lot of it has been manipulated with indoctrination. And so it's important for us to like really dive into that and to heal some of that indoctrination, and find out what those principles are for us.
I got one more like question that brings up for me, which is so talking about principles, talking about people feeling they want to hold on to what's theirs, locked away in their bubbles, not on the front lines of where it's at. So you've brought up the Kingdom of Hawaii, and there's Okinawa, like the Ryukyu Nation. So you have these people around the world, like you said, who've been fighting it since day one that it came to them. Like in Okinawa, they have been active protests against the U.S. military presence since it landed on the island. You know what I'm saying? After the bloody war and people came out of hiding, there has been resistance to the presence. And you say wherever you are in the country, there's somebody right there. And then so it comes back to principles, right? It comes back to, are you more comfortable sitting at home and pointing the finger at somebody else, or do you give some of your time? How much time of your week do you give, right, to these other people, to the other, It's not a question again. This is like just an incredible chance to talk to you. I feel super inspired. I joined the Land Back Initiative. I signed up just now, and the campaign. So I want to be updated, and I'm going to donate, and I'm going to share it. Mike, please. I know you got some things you want to say, or what's going on?
Sure. Well, we've been going strong for about 55 minutes now. We've covered a lot of great topics, and as usual in Veterans for Peace, we always want to reach out to our community, to veterans, and to the people in the National Guard, and to people that are still serving. And we want you to know that we think you should get out of the military. You should get out. You should do what you can to resist the empire. You should consider going and talking to a lawyer, talking to, let's see, we want to go to the GI Rights Hotline here. If you're a member in the military now, go to the GI Rights Hotline and talk to somebody and weigh your options. You may be able to very well be able to just get out of the military legally with an honorable discharge. You should step away from it and educate yourselves, because the military is essentially one of the most evil. I guess it's the most evil force in the world if you consider its death and destruction that it has wrought at the level of its pollution and the burning of fossil fuels. It's the largest consumer of fossil fuels in the world. It's absolutely wreaking havoc. There's nuclear contamination in the water in the Southwest on Native American lands from uranium mines. Okinawa, the bay suffers constantly from nuclear contamination from aircraft carriers. And then we have obviously the Middle East, constant bombing campaigns, men, women, and children utterly destroyed. We've lost Krystal from our chat. That's terrible. I must have been going on too long, but we are here we're close to the hour, so that's fine. We can wrap it up. If she comes back in, that'd be nice.
You have a connection issue. She was having a bad connection.
Yeah.
We were blessed with a wonderful show. We had her presence for an hour.
Yeah, we did.
Lots of knowledge and wisdom. I mean, a world of.
There she is. Here, let me bring her back in.
Yo.
Sorry.
We're so glad.
I don't know. The internet was just like, nope.
That's fine. We're at the end of the show. We're so glad you're back. We want to make sure we make an effective call to action with the.
We have a big day coming up. Yeah. What you gonna?
Yes, big day.
Yeah.
Please tell us about the big day and what should we do? What should people do?
So we're right in the middle of the Land Back campaign launch. So not the movement, but the Land Back campaign as it exists through Indian Collective. We're launching that again. That's, we're simply a mechanism to resource, connect, amplify, and coordinate land back movements and land back organizing happening already, right? But we do have a few ways to engage. And so, go to landback.org. It's, you can see it on the screen, sign up for notifications. It'll get you updates about, what our next steps are and whatnot. We are calling for action on Indigenous Peoples Day. So we're calling for folks to march on city halls, submit resolutions, and march on state capitals to get them to change the name from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, right? So there's been a huge movement of that happening. So we just continue to support that and just continue to call on people to do that with your local cities and states that haven't changed the name yet. We're calling on folks to take actions in your community. So there are actions happening all over. Like I said earlier about engagement is like, do that research, find out who those folks are that are organizing in that community, support them. We're calling for streetscapes, land back streetscapes, right? Is like, put that message out there. Let's normalize this. Let's make this a normal conversation that folks are having is Indigenous land back, and, do the streetscapes, which is basically just like, writing land back on your street, massive letters, right? So we're calling for some actions on Indigenous Peoples Day. That information will be on our website. We do have partner toolkits, that we can send out information to folks if you contact us. And so, yeah, there's that. There's those call to actions specifically for Indigenous Peoples Day. You can watch the live stream of all of the campaign launch that will be happening in Rapid City, South Dakota. So we'll be there. We'll be having deeper conversations, going farther into this and really highlighting peoples that have been doing this land back work for a long time, and like hopefully premiering our land back anthem, so we have some really amazing native hip hop artists that will be pushing out the anthem and a whole album at some point. So all that will be on Monday. And then until Monday, as we said, just go sign up at the website. Also, there's a petition there's a petition link in the chat. Sign the petition to close Mount Rushmore and demand that all public lands in Mount Rushmore be returned to the stewardship of its original peoples. And then also donate to the legal fund. We are still in the middle of all of the legal proceedings after the July 3rd arrest at Mount Rushmore. And so, we're having a big day on the 8th, is that tomorrow? So on Thursday the 8th, we have another hearing where all the land defenders, will be in the next step of that whole legal process, right? So that's another thing coming up. So we're definitely donate to that. We're still engaged in that fight on the legal front as well. Yeah, I think those are the primary ways that we're calling on folks to show up right now. Stay tuned. We do have more things coming that we won't share until Indigenous Peoples Day. But yeah, just stay active, stay engaged, dive into those relationships that are around you, and support all of these active land back movements and organizing that are happening all over the country right now.
That is dope. That is dope. Support, support, support. It is I want to say silence is violence. I want to call on my white brothers and sisters, my pale brothers and sisters, and say that you are the majority number in the country. So you need to be involved. You need to accept the truth and the history of this country, and you need to see its connection to the degradation of the world. The physical world that we are living in is being destroyed by ignoring the taking of this country and the employing of capitalism around the world. So we have to accept the truth. We have to embrace this movement. You have to be involved. You have to engage with your local communities. You have to, because otherwise you are leaving your children no future. So you have to accept this truth. You have to move forward. Thank you so much for being our guest today. Thank you so much. Please, people, get involved. Share this conversation after the show. You can keep sharing it. Let these conversations grow. Krystal Two Bulls, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me. I truly appreciate these conversations. I'm super excited to continue this relationship. And yeah, stay tuned for Indigenous Peoples Day. Let's throw down together.
Thank you, Krystal. Fantastic show.
Peace, peace, peace.